Welcome to episode 79.
Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of EO Fire, and you're listening to Who Did That Voice, where we take an in-depth look at voiceovers.
Ready to take a vacay, but you just don't have the time to plan? Let the agents at 3D Travel Company pamper you and take care of all the little details. Find us at www.whodidthatvoice.co and click the Book Now button on the left-hand side. For a limited time, Who Did That Voice listeners can receive a Disney gift card for qualifying Disney and Universal trips, booked and traveled by 2017. Hurry and book today so you can travel away.
Welcome to Who Did That Voice, the show where we take an in-depth look at voiceover. And now, here's your host, Trenton Larkin.
Hey everyone, just wanted to let you know we have launched a Patreon page. You can find us at www.patreon.com/whodidthatvoice. What is Patreon, you say? Well, it's a lot like a Kickstarter or Indiegogo campaign that allows you to help support us on a monthly basis. For as little as $1 a month, you can help support the show and earn amazing perks. Help us out today and join the Who Did That Voice family in a new way. Hello everyone and welcome back to the show. Today's special guest has done a myriad of different things in the world of voiceover, such as commercials for McDonald's, Pandora, and so much more. She's done live announce for the CMT Music Awards, dubbing, loop group work, and she's done voice matching for Disney. Stay tuned to find out more about today's special guest. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Who Did That Voice. Today on the show we have Leah McCormick joining us today. Leah, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Well, Leah, for those of you who don't know, was on my Christmas special that was called The Christmas Wish that aired December 18th. And she and I had been talking about having her on the show, but she has had such a busy schedule that it's kept her, unfortunately, away from doing the show until now. But I am super excited you're able to join me today, Leah.
Me too. No, it's going to be fun.
Well, you know, the very first thing I always like to do when I have a brand new special guest on the show is to just get a little background on them. And who was the little girl Leah growing up into the woman you've become? And how did you get into acting and more specifically voice acting?
Yeah. So, God, when I was little, I was such a tomboy. And then I got into high school and I got involved in the theater arts. So I did plays and musicals, and even was a cheerleader for a short period of time, but kind of fell in love with performing, I think, at that age. When I went to college, I went to the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising. So I also had this side love for fashion and style and costuming and things like that. So that's actually what I ended up studying in college, and then worked in the fashion industry for many years post-college. But I always acted as a hobby. So it was just one of those things that, I'd audition for a play here, or I, booked a feature film there. And so I just found myself continuing to act no matter what. And then I kind of got to that point in life where I started to debate, if I was in the right career, if I should make acting a full-time thing or not. And a friend of mine who had a contract to do a lot of dubbing work. So it was a, Japanese company that wanted to dub a lot of movies in English, asked me to come in and do a couple characters for some animated films and live action feature. And I fell in love with voiceover. And luckily, they also loved my voice. So they made my first commercial demo. And, I participated in it and kind of was a part of the collaborative process. But that took me to my first voiceover casting director and then my first voiceover agent. And then it just kind of took off from there. So always loved acting, fell into voiceover, and then it just kind of took over.
Fantastic, Leah.
Yeah.
Well, and I know you do voice match, and that was kind of a way that you got into some other avenues, which we'll dive into here in a moment. But what are some other genres or types of VO work that you have participated in, or what are some of your favorites?
Yeah. So because when I studied fashion, the emphasis of my degree was merchandise marketing and product development outside of like the design elements. So there is this part of my brain that really loves marketing and advertising. So commercial work for me is the jam. Like I could do it all day long.
Awesome.
Some people think it's just like, oh, that's where you make the money. It's not as creative, but I think it's really challenging. I think in order to, talk about things and sell things in a way that's conversational and authentic and, to kind of dig through copy and find the story or find the emotion, like to me, that totally excites me and I love it, which I think is why the majority of the work that I do is in radio, and TV too, but definitely that commercial world. And then you did mention the voice matching, and that's its own thing. I think growing up loving musicals, I always emulated the sounds of all the different people singing. And then, you do so many different characters in that. And so that kind of led me into mimicking. And my very first audition for a live announce job was voice match. So essentially, they had a show. It was on CMT. It was the Artist of the Year Awards. And they were looking for somebody who could emulate that sound. Now, I had never done live announce. I didn't really know what it was at the time. I mean, everyone knows when you watch the Oscars or the Tonys, there's that person that's like, this person has been nominated for blah, blah. We all know that. But to really investigate it and look into that world. I mean, it was a pretty small little group of women and men that were really kind of dominating that market, and still is. But, so I listened and listened and listened and learned and mimicked and then, found myself kind of falling into that genre. And I think even with animation, kind of the same thing, there's nothing you can do that's better for you than just to mimic and study if you're trying to get into that world. And that's what really helped me.
Absolutely, Leah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that and some of the different genres of VO that you do. With mentioning the mimicking again and the voice matching, I believe there are some NDA, of course, things we're not really able to talk about, but you have worked with and for currently Disney. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, even outside of the animation world, there's so much voice matching that goes on, and I kind of feel like it's letting out this little secret of the world, as far as entertainment goes. But
Yeah.
someone they might make a movie, and then the celebrity can't come in and fix some audio that needs to be fixed, or maybe they're doing something related to the movie, and the celebrity can't come in and do it. And so they find people all the time for everything from animation to live action, even commercial work when they want somebody to sound like someone else. I did a really cool spot for 7-Eleven and what was it, Coca-Cola. And this is a commercial spot where they wanted a Selena Gomez sound. And so, they just wanted it to sound 100% like her. And they weren't, going out there and boasting that it was her, but they just wanted people to hear it and be like, oh, it's Selena. So, with the Disney stuff, it's kind of that same world. So there's sometimes it's television shows, sometimes it's gaming. So I've worked for Disney XD and Disney Interactive. And so you go in and you match current characters that are already established in some of the biggest genres that exist. So, like for them, whether it's Frozen or A Bug's Life or Maleficent, whatever it might be, there's voice match artists for pretty much every character you can think of.
Well, that has to be a most fascinating job to get to kind of dive into the world of some of these other topics that have been established, and you're just being able to be a continued part of that work.
Yeah, in some ways, I almost want to say it's easy because you don't have to develop the character, which is something that they do, but you also have to be able to match it in a variety of emotions. So, I went in to do a video game once where, you have you're just doing these adventurous things because that's what happens, and then also you're singing and so you might be upset, you might be elated, you might be scared, you might whatever, but you have to be able to stay in those characters regardless of the emotion or the experience. And I think that's where the real challenge comes in. And that's kind of where it gets fun too, navigating those waters.
Fantastic. Well, when we were talking about diversity in voiceover, I believe you also have some diversity when it comes to your talent agencies as well.
Yeah. So, I didn't share a little bit of kind of how I broke into things, but I remember, doing some dubbing in the very beginning and thinking, God, I love voiceover. This is great. And I've always loved singing. I grew up in a really musical family. So my dad played piano and guitar. My sister sang to everything, sang along to everything with me. And so I fell in love with VO. And I remember meeting somebody who was the president of an ad agency and just casually, socially. And I mentioned to him that I was fascinated with voiceover. And he mentioned that he had worked in radio for forever and said what he did and gave me his card. And so, it wasn't until maybe a year and a half, 2 years later that I sent him my demo because that's when it was ready. I took classes and, made the first demo that I made with the company that I did the dubbing with, and then actually ended up making a second demo within a year. You just learn so much, and you're like, oh, how can I be more competitive, and what do I need to change, and how do I grow? So I sent him that second demo, and then within I think like the first 6 months, I became one of the main voices for Gold's Gym, which I don't know if they have that there, but they're pretty popular in LA.
Yeah.
And so that became like my first consistent campaign that I've done since 2014, which is great. And so that was a huge win. But then, we just kind of live in a day and age where you have to diversify and you have to kind of move beyond just your main home base agent, wherever that is for you. So, I started with one LA agent, and now I work with 9 different agencies all across the US, which is great because you get to do a huge amount of work. And sometimes you don't get the same opportunities from agent to agent. So it's, everyone kind of sees you in a different light and sees your different strengths and sends you different things. And so it's nice, you just get you're in a bigger pond, I guess.
Do you ever find it to be challenging with 9 different agencies? Do you end up having like all 9 of them sometimes offering you jobs and you're like, holy cow, which ones do I go for? Or
Yeah, well, I mean, I try to always keep my loyalty to my LA agent because it is my home base.
yeah.
And then, obviously in the regional market, I think anyone who kind of operates in that same way knows that sometimes you get auditions from the same agents, or sorry, you get the same audition from different agents. And so, then it just becomes, giving first priority to who first sent it to you. And then sometimes you're just booked on stuff and you can't do everything.
Yeah.
I'm really big on setting a timer. Like if you wake up and you've got 15 to 20 different auditions, you're like, okay, I can only spend this much. Even if you want to spend all the time in the world on them, you just can't. You just got to kind of get through it and, make your way. But yeah, it's just about time management, I think, and then, loyalty and priority and things like that. But I do think it's funny that when it rains, it pours. Like last week, I actually took a job where I worked, I shot a commercial for Visa, which was 3 days doing on-camera work. And then had 2 callbacks, and then I had at least 2 to 3 auditions every day where I was like, I just can't do it. So, you balance it out. And I obviously do a little bit of on-camera and voiceover, so maybe I make it harder for myself. I don't know. But there's plenty of people who are working in so many different genres of voiceover that I'm sure that they experience the same juggling act.
Well, I know with some of the different things you've kind of mentioned doing some work for radio stations and such. Speaking of radio, how did you end up getting involved to work with Pandora Radio, and what are some of the different jobs and things you've done with the radio stations in the past?
Yeah, so kind of a similar experience. I do a ton of improv, and I ended up meeting a producer for Premiere Networks, which is a subsidiary of iHeartRadio.
Okay.
So, a lot of like online streaming radio, that kind of thing. And so I did work for them in the beginning, like I'd say the first 6 months to a year of me really exploring voiceover. I got to do a lot of commercial jobs through Premiere. And then this is going to sound so crazy because everyone's like, oh, you put a website up and nobody sees it and whatever, So, but I did. I put up my website for my voice acting and everything that was going on. And then Pandora contacted me and asked me if I wanted to audition to be on their roster. And I was like, okay, sure. And then, that was, I think, the end of 2014. And I've been with them ever since. And they are amazing. You get to do so many different types of ads, but then also you'll do work for Pandora itself. So I might be the voice of a station, which is a little bit more like radio imaging. This morning I just auditioned to be like the voice of Pandora within Pandora. So there are opportunities that come up like that, but for the most part, they cast everything in-house. McDonald's comes to Pandora, Pandora wants to, or McDonald's comes to Pandora and they want to do an ad, then Pandora just casts within, and then, you're sent their script and you put it together and you make it happen. So it's great. I mean, through Pandora, I've done just about anything you can imagine, from McDonald's to Nordstrom to PF Chang to Microsoft. I could kind of go on forever with them. But yeah, you'll end up doing hundreds of ads a year. And I think it's really where I learned everything that it takes to do something like live announce. Because live announce is so on the spot. And you just have to be able to, pick it up and go and pick it up and go. And yeah, I just kind of feel like I got my black belt in VO in general by working for Pandora. They've been great.
That's awesome. Well, I definitely want to jump back to the live announce here in just a second. But as far as Pandora goes, so you said you actually auditioned to be the voice of Pandora.
Yeah, so every now and then you do get auditions for random things that come out, that come through Pandora.
Yeah.
But 99% of the time you're in the mix and the job is yours and it just, it's very simple. But yeah, but that was a random thing that happened this week where I was like, okay, that would be amazing. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's a good gig.
Well, that would absolutely be epic. I know when I've had special guests on the show before that, I've heard on commercials on Pandora or other things, it's like, wow, I know them, and it just makes it that much more real for me. And I'm sure for my listeners on the show as well.
Yeah, I'm surprised how small the Pandora world is. I think even in the last year have met so many people that work for Pandora, and it's great. We'll never see each other or work together in that capacity because we're all in our little booths. But yeah, but it's awesome.
Well, when we go back, you were kind of talking about live announced, Leah, and I believe you had announced several different shows. Is that correct?
Yeah, so my very first show was the CMT Artists of the Year Awards, and that was 2015. And it's kind of a neat story because I auditioned for that show when I first signed with my LA agent, and it was, again, the voice match audition, and so they reached out to my agent at the time and the CMT, the network, and said, oh, we love this audition. We love her, but like, what has she done? And my agent's like, nothing. I just signed her. She's like, I don't know what to tell you. But then it was great because a year later, I had booked a great number of things, and Disney was one of them, and that's always great. Everyone loves Disney.
Yeah.
And so they gave me the chance to do the show the very next year without auditioning for it. And so I flew off to Nashville and did the show, and it really is all live. I don't know how people think it works, and I didn't know how it worked in the beginning, but yeah, you get there, and every celebrity that comes to the stage to accept, or every person that's coming up to present, or the commercial bumpers that kind of go in and out of the program, you're doing all of those live, and they change by the minute. So you might get there and do a rehearsal, and then by the time you go to do the live show, they have completely changed the script, and things are different. So you really have to be able to take it on the fly, but it's fun. I do live improv, so for me it's kind of like doing live theater, and it's got its rush in that way. But so after I did the first show, then about 6 months later, I went back and did the CMT Music Awards. And that show is amazing. It's this huge event that happens in Nashville where just thousands of people fill the streets, and they've got live concerts going on like 3 or 4 different stages. So it's a much bigger platform than just the Artist of the Year Awards. And I got to introduce Keith Urban, who's one of my,
Oh, wow.
all-time celebrity crushes. So that was amazing. And then I did the following year, I just did the 2016 CMT Artist of the Year Awards. So it was like 3 back to back to back. So now I'm definitely kind of obsessed with live announce and just kind of hoping that more opportunities come my way.
Absolutely. Well, that has to be a thrilling time for you because, it seems like it from the way you talk about it, but it just, the diversity of how, like everything can change just from the rehearsal to the actual live event. And that's just awesome.
Yeah. It's funny. I talk to people who've done it, and some people are like, right, it's amazing. It's such a rush. And then some people who've never done it were like, oh, no, 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 no. No, I would never want to do that. Never. That would be crazy. So I don't know. For me, I think, I talked earlier about like, oh yeah, if you only have, certain number of hours to knock out, 15 to 20 things, like you just have to get through things. And so I kind of like moving at that pace because otherwise you just sit with it too long, and then, then you overwork it, and then it's not interesting anymore. But
Absolutely. Well, Leah, I was looking at your IMDb page, and I was looking at the 40-Year-Old Virgin, which came out in 2005, and it showed you had an uncredited role as the girl in the electric store. Is that correct?
Okay. Oh my God, that's hilarious. Yeah, so that is actually how I became a member of SAG.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was, like I said, I always did random acting things as a hobby,
Hmm.
even when I was in college and even when I was working other jobs. And so that was the very first thing that I was cast in that got me into the union. And so essentially, it's like, Steve Carell's in the electronic store, and they kind of had like 3 or 4 of us, younger women. attractive ish, that they wanted to like make Steve Carell nervous. And so that was my first experience working on a set. And now loving improv the way that I do, it's crazy to look back and see how that was shot because, they would just record and then they would just do like, 10 to 12 different takes and everything was improv and everything was off the cuff. And just a crazy talented cast. So it was neat.
That had to be fun. So did you actually get a chance to speak with Steve or Paul Rudd or any of the other guys or gals on that cast?
Yeah, you talked with everyone, but it was, it was brief and everyone's
Yeah.
kind of working and doing their thing. And they're pretty much in every scene and you're just kind of like there in it, slight interacting. So,
Yeah.
it was fun. And I was also, I was kind of starstruck at that age too. So I was just like, hi, how are you? So yeah, not, we're not best friends, but it was fun.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, just
Yeah.
the fact that you were able to kind of get some immersion in their world of what was going on and just to be a part of that. That would be just epic for me, I know. So,
Yeah.
but what are some other projects that you've worked on or, VO or otherwise that you've enjoyed doing or that we haven't discussed yet?
When you talk about enjoyment, there's nothing I love more than the live announce.
Yeah.
But also because I got my start in dubbing, I was able to do loop group work, which is also really fun. And it's one of those things too that most people don't know about. My dad loves the show Arrow on CW.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I went in to work on that show. And, a lot of it is like martial arts, fighting, sound effects, things like that. Not necessarily what someone would predict I would do. But it was, it was great. It was fun. It was, I feel like if I could do more dubbing, I would. I just don't feel like I have time for it. But loop group and dubbing is super fun, and I wish I could do more of it. I just did a video game for a Japanese company called Cygames. It's called Shadowverse, and I got to play, 6 different characters, all ages like 13 to 20. All these like, kind of neat fantasy action-based figures. And so because so much of the work that I do every day is commercial, like when I get to get out of the booth and go work in a different studio and do fun stuff like that, especially when it plays with age ranges, that to me is totally enjoyable.
I bet it is getting to kind of diversify within a whole nother genre of things.
Yeah, because I think everybody finds those little pockets that they fall into, whether it's, audiobooks or commercial or animation or whatever. But yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like I said, I love commercial work. But anytime I get to work outside of it, it's awesome.
Absolutely. Well, Leah, I have just a few more questions for you. Do you have social media that people can reach out to you on, whether they've got questions about VO or maybe they're looking to potentially hire you even?
Yeah, so pretty much everything is Leah McCormick VO. You can go to leahmccormick.com and you can pretty much access any of my social media handles straight from there. But whether it's Twitter, or LinkedIn, or Facebook or Instagram, it's all Leah McCormick VO. And that's just the letter V, the letter O. So super simple.
Absolutely. I love it when you keep it simple like that because it makes it easy for everyone to find you that way.
That's the plan, right?
Absolutely. Findability so that we can get ourselves out there in the world. Well, what kind of advice would you give, Leah, to someone who might be interested in joining the acting world and maybe kind of getting into that niche of voiceover one day?
Yeah, I think for me, because I always had a passion for it, but didn't necessarily make it my career. It was easy for it to always be there, but not necessarily be like the life force or to support me financially.
Yeah.
And I think the more that you can understand that it is a business in addition to being an art form, and kind of try to find that balance and really work on both sides of your career, I think that's what will push you forward and kind of differentiate you from the pack. But also too, I think it comes down to training. I'm an advocate for always being in class. When I first wanted to get into voiceover, I felt kind of silly taking a voiceover class, because I was already working and I had already graduated college and I'd been acting for, any of the things that you could think when you're insecure about anything. You're like, should I be doing this? I don't know. And so, I took my first class and I really loved it. And I tried in the beginning, and this might be the most helpful piece of advice I could possibly share, is to know that I couldn't do everything. And so to try and, put my feet in and figure out different subgenres within voiceover and figure out where I fit and what really made me happy. So in the beginning, I took, a promo class, commercial, animation, audiobook, everything. Dubbing. I even took an ADR class after I'd already done it for a while, but I just really wanted to figure out where I wanted to put my focus. And I decided for me that was commercial and animation. And I think just being specific and putting all my time and energy into those areas has been helpful. Because sometimes I think we want to do everything, and we can do everything, just not all at once. So yeah, and then, just kind of understanding who you are and bringing your signature sound to the table, being you. It took me a while to figure out, I don't know, in the beginning, doing a lot of commercial work, you find out who you are in different sounds, right? So if someone sent me a job and they're like, okay, this needs to be informative versus conversational versus energetic versus, so finding out who you are in all the direction that gets thrown at you takes a little bit of time. But once you figure out where you really pop, then it's kind of coming up with your signature sound and saying, okay, if somebody really wanted, these 4 things, if they wanted inviting, invigorating, warm, and with it, I can bring that all day long. That's me. But that took time. So, just getting out there, exploring, and the more you work, the more you learn. I know a lot of people start in the beginning doing pay to play. And I think you just have to either be auditioning or working every day in order to really figure it out and to get into your groove. So sometimes the auditions come our way in the beginning, sometimes they don't. And I think that's where pay to play can be great. I know there's a lot of controversy right now with pay to play and whether the rates are fair and all that. And so, you kind of have to run your own business and set your own standards. And obviously if you're in the union, then the standards are set for you. But yeah, you have to know what you want and you have to have standards for yourself and not work below them.
Absolutely, Leah. I really appreciate you sharing your advice with us today and kind of the diversity of how you reached out to touch different areas of VO and then kind of narrow it down to find the ones that worked best for you. I think that's really fantastic. I've got just 2 final questions for you, Leah. And the first of the 2 is, what was your favorite cartoon character or cartoon show growing up and why?
What was my favorite cartoon? Oh my gosh. When you first said that, I was like, Fraggle Rock. I was like, that was not a cartoon. No, but it really was one of my favorite things.
It was really good though.
No, it was. Oh, that's tough.
But that had VO.
No, it did. No, it totally did. Favorite cartoon growing up. I mean, honestly, anything Disney.
Okay.
And that kind of leads itself to being more like animated films than TV shows. But just like anybody else, all the classics, whether it's Cinderella or The Little Mermaid, I've seen every movie 1,000 times and would still watch them 1,000 times.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a sucker for anything Disney.
Oh, I totally hear you there. Well, the last question I have for you today, Leah, is what is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
That's an interesting question. So I think because I've started to move into live announce and promo is kind of a natural transition, promo and trailer and live announce can be a rather male-dominated field. And I think just being a part of, there being a balance kind of happening and shifting happening, I think being a part of bringing more of a female perspective and sharing my point of view as a woman and encouraging other women to have a voice and that kind of thing, that inspires me. That's where I kind of see this taking me in the future. And also, being able to share my gift through teaching as well down the road. I think that that's going to be a way that I kind of contribute with my legacy and share the gifts that I've been given. So, yeah.
I think that's wonderful.
I was like, I think that's it.
Well, I think that's wonderful, that you're wanting to, leave your mark on the world and be a woman of inspiration. I think that's wonderful.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Well, Leah, it has been an absolute honor and pleasure having you on the show today. Would you please give us a closeout today as we wrap up the episode?
Sure. This is Leah McCormick on Trenton Larkin's 2017 Who Did That Voice? Hey guys, this is Leah McCormick, and you've been listening to Who Did That Voice?
Well, everyone, I sure hope you enjoyed today's episode with Leah McCormick. And if you did, please find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram by searching Who Did That Voice. I would love to hear from you. A question you might ask yourself is, where can I listen to Who Did That Voice? That's an excellent question. You can hear us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, and our website at www.whodidthatvoice.co. Click the Episodes tab and listen away. Well, everyone, that's all the time we have for this episode. Join us this Friday for our next special guest, Shannon Farnan, the voice of Wonder Woman from Super Friends. You won't want to miss this episode. Hey, do you ask yourself who did that voice? Well, if you do, go to our website, www.whodidthatvoice.co, and click on the Episodes tab. Choose an actor, pick their name, and see pictures from the different characters they've voiced in their career.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time for more discoveries on Who Did That Voice.